Hello, happy Tuesday. Welcome back to another episode of The Practice. This show is an unrehearsed, unedited look into my digital art workflow. I'm Stuart. I'm a 3D artist, illustrator, animator, and your friend, and I'm super excited to come back to the table for another episode of making cool stuff this week. See, I got a bunch of reference images pulled up on the screen already. I've got Adobe Fuse opened up, and I think we're gonna head back into some territory that we've charted in the past, but I think we're going to take a little bit of a different spin on it. One of the things I'm routinely super inspired about is these African masks and this sort of tribal art. And a couple months ago, I was lucky enough to get an invite to this like collector's show of tribal art and masks, and I've got this whole folder full of images that are just super inspiring, and I've narrowed in on this particular piece, both for the texture and the color and this really interesting shape. And since this shape is so interesting and so tall and thin, I thought it would contrast really nicely against someone who is wearing it. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to head into Adobe Fuse actually today to generate a really basic and somewhat realistic human mesh. Use Mixamo to pose that quickly, and then we're going to sculpt this mask sort of over top of the human form that we generate with Fuse. So that being said, I think it's time to dig in. Episode 48, creeping ever closer to that 50 mark, which is really awesome. Broke 700 subscribers this past week, which is also really exciting. Creeping ever closer to that 1,000-person mark, which is going to be a big breakthrough for us. So, as always, get in the chat, say what's up, let us know what you're working on. A lot of times recently we've been doing this, sort of later in the show feature where we take a little bit of work from the chat and the community, and we share the link live, and I'll just kind of maybe give a little bit of feedback or a little bit of encouragement, and you can get more eyeballs in front of your work. And these episodes are always best when there's an active chat and folks are sharing and discussing, and that stuff's all super exciting for me. So that being said, let's dig in. Let's get this thing going. So I'm not going to worry. I'm going to start generating this basic form of a human being here, and I'm not going to care too much about the face, to be honest, because I think we're going to wind up covering most of that. I'm going to go through and just select male fit A for each of these body parts. And what we can do is customize some of these things a bit. So since this is so tall, this mask is so tall and thin, I think I also want this fella to kind of have long limbs. So I'm just subtly stretching out the limbs a bit. I think I want to keep them fairly slim too. What's cool about Fuse is you can, you can generate with basically no 3D skills. You can just sort of click and drag some of these options and generate some really nice human forms. And even if you are fairly familiar with 3D applications, you can really quickly get a human form in for posing or for even just having like a scale figure in a model, which is super useful for describing scale in a piece. And I know a lot of what you see it on Instagram and a lot of 3D art is where people will stick little miniature figures in their scene to give like this really impressive sense of scale. And this is a great way to do that. You can also see how easy it is to just, with this button, kick it over to Mixamo if you have an account over there, which is easy to create. And then all of a sudden you've got, a mesh that's super easy to pose and has all the rigging involved. So fairly cool. So we could also go in, customize the clothing. I think I'm going to leave him shirtless. And let's see what kind of bottoms we have here. I'll say the one thing is there aren't always the best clothing selection options in here. In which case, I might just leave them in these very basic trunks. I thought I could customize the skin color a little bit. Ah, there we go. Skin. That's interesting, this age slider. Let's take a look at what that does to him. Oh yeah, it really does add some wrinkles. Which is kind of cool. I'll probably wind up pulling back a little bit on some of the skin texture as we get deeper into the episode. I actually kind of like that aged look a bit. It's a bit weird. Hmm. There we go. Do a little taller. Tall, skinny fella. So I think that, is about as far as we want to take it. So I'm going to do a quick save as. I should be able to just click this right over to Mixamo. Get a nice little pose on this fella. So you can see how quick that was. So just, get a little bit of customization on it, but really generate a workable human figure in, 10 minutes. So Fuse is increasingly a part of my workflow, particularly as it relates to, these kinds of forms. So I've also noticed that the the meshes generated by Fuse play really nicely with the Mixamo like auto rigger. Sometimes when you're doing your own characters, it takes a bit of back and forth to get that balance right and to get the rig applied to the mesh in a clean, usable way. I've definitely gone back and forth my fair share of times, but with this Fuse mesh, it typically rigs really, really cleanly straight out of the gate. So let's see how that goes. So something went wrong. It's funny, just as I was talking about how well that typically works, you get a little error. Go figure. I'll try that again. That's the first time I've ever had an issue with the Fuse model going over to Mixamo. Let's keep our fingers crossed. Hey Candy, how's it going? Doing well, how are you? Thanks for tuning in again this week. Things are going well. Actually had a little error with this Fuse upload, which is rare. Because typically Mixamo really enjoys these direct from Fuse meshes. All right, we didn't get an immediate error. Okay, there we go. Better. Rizo, what up? So, for those of you that missed the intros, folks are starting to pile into the chat here. What we're doing this week is we're continuing with my obsession of tribal art and funky masks. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this crazy mask and use it as inspiration. What I've done quickly in the first 10 or 15 minutes of the episode here is just generate a really basic human form, which I'm going to pose now in Mixamo, which we're part of the way through. And then I'm going to put the mask sort of on this character. So that's good. Glad to see this new chat client I'm using is working. So I'm going to close these others, which is great. You've had some problems taking Cinema 4D models and rigging them in Mixamo. So I would say, I mean, you have to use an FBX, I believe, or an OBJ. That's typically helpful. I would also say that it depends on what issues you're having. Make sure your segments are high enough, your subdivisions are high enough, so that around joints you'll get a smooth deformation. If the poly count is too low, then there won't be any individual shapes to bend, and those bends will get really crude, unfortunately. I'd also say that it has to be like a humanoid shape, right? Like you can't, if you got three legs or wings or something like that, a lot of times you're going to have issues, unfortunately. So there you go. Hopefully that helps. If you have like a screenshot, just epic fails on loading the FBX. Do you try again? I notice sometimes if you just re-upload, you'll have a little bit of better luck. It doesn't do it exactly the same way each time. Hopefully that helps. If you want, maybe you could send me a screenshot and show me what issues you're having, and maybe I could look at it a little bit more in depth in an email tomorrow or a little later today, something like that. Tough to say exactly without seeing the piece. So now I'm just trying to find a nice sort of idle pose for this guy, because the T pose is kind of lame, and I'm not sure that I'll be doing an animation at all this week. Probably just a fairly simple, single frame. But we want to get a nice relaxed pose to start from when we're doing that. Let's see here. Hello, Hazam. Hmm. Just trying to find the right pose here. Hmm. And something like this would be the way to go. And even though this is an animation, I can download the whole thing and just pull a single frame from it, which I do somewhat frequently, to be honest. Maybe that one's a little bit more interesting. Yeah, I'm going to go with that. Add to my assets, and it looks like it's got a bit more customization options here. So I can pause them around here. Raise the stance and lower it a bit. Too high. All right. I think that'll do just fine. Let's download this and I'll show you how I like to extract frames. And then we'll get into modeling a mask on this guy. And I think the wild proportions of this mask are going to feel a lot more interesting when they're overlaid onto a human body. So. All right, so when you're pulling those animations in that you download, it's always best to merge them in instead of opening them as a new scene. Because I'm not sure exactly why, but for some reason, Cinema will. Gosh, how do I even explain this? Cinema will have a lot of options locked out, so this thinks you're loading just a specific animation, and it sort of minimizes some of the options that you have, and it asks about reassignments of takes, which I don't know how to manage all that well. And there's probably lots of functionality that I'm missing out on here because I don't understand it. But what are we gonna do? You'll also notice, and this is fairly common with Fuse, is that these materials come in a little wonky. And for whatever reason, it wants to put alpha channels in the transparency channel. So what I find, if you just turn that transparency channel off, go to transparency, take this image, drag it into the alpha, it behaves a little bit better. Well, it behaves much, much better. What I think this really is for is the eyelashes. You get a nice alpha channel on the lashes. But to be honest, for this exercise, I'm not sure we even need that, right? I might lose, I'll leave the normal map on for now. We may come in and simplify some of those textures depending on how that fits in with the mask we create. So now I'm going to turn the joints off just so I can see the pose a little bit better. Let's find the frame we want to keep. It's somewhere around here. While I'm facing forward, cool. I think that's it. So then what I do is hit this button, which basically means unfold all. I think you can find that right here. Left click. I basically select all. And you want to make sure so that all the keyframes are on these joint objects. But what happens if you select just this one when we go to delete keyframes, it'll only delete keyframes from the hips, right? So you watch, delete that one. But then your spine still got that keyframe, as does all this other stuff. So what I like to do is simply unfold all and select all. So that way I know I'm getting all the keyframes here. And I want to keep frame 89. So what I typically do is I delete, oops, and you got to watch where your cursor is. I just deleted everything. Make sure your cursor is in the timeline when you start deleting frames. So I delete the one before, the one after. What you can do is click and drag and just delete all these guys. All right. Now we've only got one keyframe, and then you can just delete this. We've got no animation left, but the pose is locked in just where we want it, which is great, what we want. The other thing, I think for modeling, we want this guy sort of dead center. So I'm going to group him, and I'm going to rotate him so that his face is facing forward, which is just going to make dropping primitives in on top of it and lining stuff around his face. It's just going to make all that a little bit easier. And depending on what you're making, sometimes it would make sense to apply. Hold on one sec. Sometimes it would make sense to do this modeling first, keep your character in the T-pose, apply whatever effects or additional items that you need to it, and then pose it with Mixamo. But I'm going to take this mask, and it's gonna occupy like a huge part of sort of the torso area. And if we started posing that, it would really start twisting and behaving weirdly. And since I'm not going to be doing an animation with this model, it makes sense to just do the pose of the body first and then add the mask on top, which I want to stay fairly static. So that's going to be that. What's up, Source? So I was just explaining, we're going to be, just finished posing this dude up, and then we're going to be modeling and texturing and adding this really cool tribal mask that I saw at a like a tribal art show several months back. We've just gotten this guy posed up to where we want him. So let's start modeling. Body. Cool. Oh, the other thing I just did was turn the eyelashes off. One is because they don't always look the best. And two, because we don't really need that level of detail for this, because we're going to be covering it, right? So, all right. What I might actually do is, and a little bit later, since if I don't want these just simple black shorts, what I'll probably wind up doing is painting painting over the actual image itself and adding some detail into the shorts. So I think this is like the basic short texture right here. I think I might add a little zigzag or something like that, but we'll get into that later. All depends on how the mask comes together and what we want to do there. Good one, Chris. No, we won't be doing a perverted stream. Well, hopefully not. We'll see how it goes. All right, so now that we've got the base figure in place, I'm going to start modeling this awesome mask. It's a cool sweater. Look at that, man. High fashion right there. You guys like that? Oh, that's cool, Hazem. Yeah, I'm glad that you tuned into the videos afterwards, but it's awesome to have you join the stream live. I think the show's probably a little better live than it would be in the recap. I mean, the recap's fine, but a lot of times you'll see the tutorials about cinema and other digital art applications on YouTube are, they're all pretty nicely produced and they've been cut and edited, and you don't have to skip around as much to find what you're looking for if you want to use this in a truly, tutorial style capacity. What I like, and I think, I think there could be some interest for it. I think the folks in the chat and the routine guests would attest to this, but I think there is a market for live art, for watching people create on the fly. That's what I'm most interested in. Let's see. So what's up with everyone in the chat? What are you guys working on? Any links to share? Maybe while this is rendering out later, we can do another little show and tell. I'd like to make that more of a routine part of the show. I think it'd be a great way to use up a little bit of time we have sometimes when things are rendering. If anyone's got anything they're working on that they want some feedback on, or just want to share with folks, get some more attention or eyes on their stuff, upload it and share a link in the chat. We'll take a peek at that later. Oh, okay, Chris, have the Grayscale Gorilla guys been streaming more as well? I haven't been tuning into them as routinely as I did when I was first starting out with cinema. They're a great resource for learning. They really are. All right, so let's see here. Start adding in some detail. I'm going to take this symmetry, just copy it, and use that to punch the holes in the mask for the eyes. There's a little bit of unneeded geometry in that technique, but I already had it. This is what we're doing. There are two of those. It's really weird. Ah, that's why. There we go. I needed the whole symmetry in the bool, not the caps. I had my hierarchies wrong. Watch your hierarchies, kids. That unfortunately makes this mask seem way too thick, right? Put on there, fella. Whoops. Hey, Source. Yeah, so that what I use a lot is it's called soft surface modeling. So I just hit space to get the selection, tool up, then you make this selection. I'll hit space again, actually, so you can see it underneath the move, the selection, underneath the properties for the move tool and the select tool is something called soft selection. You can turn it off, turn it on. And what soft selection allows you to do is set a fall off for your selection, which is represented by that yellow fade, right? You can set it really small or really large. But what that allows you to do is have sort of feathered selections so that you can move things and it moves some of the surrounding geometry with it. So like, the difference is here. I'll just select one. If I had soft selection off, right, it would obviously just pull this polygon out and you'd have really hard edges, and I mean, maybe that's what you need, probably not. With soft selection, you can pull things to get a little bit more of a gentle curve because it'll have a fall off of items it'll bring with it. You can do that with scale and with rotate as well. It's been super useful for me. A lot of people use the magnet tool instead, but this is just sort of what has found its way and stuck in my workflow. I may even use Photoshop to clip some of these textures out and apply them directly to the model. I might try doing that next. I'm going to add a few more details to the geometry and see if we can't just start pulling textures directly from this bad boy. Okay, who wants to see a fun shortcut that I just learned about? Okay, so if you're in vertex selection mode or edge mode, right? And instead of going to loop selection, what you can do is actually just double click on a segment and it'll automatically select that loop for you. How awesome is that? It's a little time saver I discovered recently. This is reminding me a bit of an elephant, right? In the way that that looks. Unfortunately, I don't think that double click move works in polygon or point selection mode. I actually discovered that by accident a few weeks ago. Cool. I really love this style of mouth. It's really goofy, but it works awesome for me. So funny. Let's bust out a little test rendering. What do you say? We'll start texturing this dude up. Oops. Cool, let's check this out, Chris. Oh yeah, very cool. I like that gradient too. Nice. And are these crystal effects on the side here all generated with just displacement maps as well? Is this all displacement maps? Looks cool. All right, so I'm going to try to just use Photoshop. Pull these textures right out of these photos. See how that treats us. Not all of them, but some of them for sure. Because recreating this would be tough, and I like how it's not perfectly symmetrical. There's little errors and issues with it, which is cool. So let's go. And what I know is that Cinema wants to read the texture images out of a folder called text. So I'm just going to generate that myself. Cinema would usually generate that for me if I'd forgotten, but I'm just going to generate that myself. Let's see what the best way to do this is. So I'm going to, cropping it in as close to the edges as possible. I'm going to take that red out because we're going to want to add that as a geometric detail. Let's see what happens when we do this. Yeah, smart selection on Photoshop is pretty darn good. In the more recent versions of Creative Suite, you can just hit Shift. Wow, it's pretty amazing how it continues these bead patterns. So as I make my selection and I hit Shift Delete, make sure it says Content Aware Selection, and it just sort of copies this out, which is great because that's going to give us some overlap pattern, right? Like I'm still going to stick to this circle, but it's good to have a bit of bleed on the edges so things don't have to be lined up perfectly. And also because this is, this is not a perfect circle, but the circle in our model is a perfect circle. So there would be some edges that wouldn't line up properly. There'd be some funkiness going on if we weren't to create this a bit of additional space for ourselves around the edges. So that's what we're doing. That's going to be good enough. You notice I'm taking this red strip out because we have a little bit of a torus in there that I'm going to apply this red shape to, if it works. And a lot of times, I'll see these masks would sort of update the color palette. I'm really digging this color palette. It's working well. It's a bit of it's funny for an ancient mask. It's a bit of a trendy color pattern, right? With these pinks and baby blues. Millennial pink. What do they call that? By the way, how the hell did that get the name Millennial Pink? What about that is millennial? All right, so I'm gonna call that good. Let's see what happens when we drop that. Just landscape objects. Got it. Cool. Where are we? So, make a new material. Let's apply that right there. Ha. Now, that's not quite right, obviously. Let's check it out. I don't think we're going to want UVW mapping. I think we're going to want cylindrical, right? Ha! Look at that. Lines up pretty well. I think that might be just the inner circle. 10 is too much. 10 is too little, I should say. So let's try 14. Oh, and look at that. Shoot, symmetry doesn't work. That is a bummer. Bummer. That's okay, because it's a fairly simple object. So what I might do is just duplicate that there. Let's get this lined up properly. And I'm just using the geometry itself to see where the center point is and get it close-ish. Whoops. Oops. Come on. That'll do. That'll do for now. All right. Now what I'm going to do, instead of using a symmetry object, because that funky texture thing was happening, I'm just going to use the character tool, the mirror tool under the character palette. Bam. Let's see. Yes. Great. So I might have to expand that so we get a true mirror. There we go. Cool. Well, it's still not perfect. Look at where that one lines up. Where this one lines up, but that's okay. We can make that slight adjustment. Oops. Whoops. That pattern's great. I think what I might do is, this is probably going to work pretty well. I'm just going to grab this color and bring it over to the bump channel. Turn it on, which will help turn the strength up a bit. I can't tell too much there, but I'm going to leave it in. I think it's going to affect the lighting in a little bit more of a realistic way. Now, maybe we can grab, not maybe, I'm fairly confident we can grab more textures from this thing, go straight on. Well, it's a bit asymmetrical. Let's see how this goes. Maybe it would make sense, actually, to make it truly symmetrical by just like deleting half and copying the other end over. This isn't going to line up exactly. Well, the truth be told, it doesn't look terrible. Hmm. So right now I'm just using the warp tool on one side to sort of line some of these elements up. I'm going to try this again. Sorry, folks, round two. think I need to do, so I'm just going to mask this off so I'm not actually deleting the other side. And I think what I need to do is maybe do some warping in advance to get this one side a little bit more symmetrical before I then go and copy it over to the other. Shoot, what I should also do, delete those extra pixels. Cropped pixels, cool, don't need them. So yeah, so I'm going to try and get, I'm going to use these little handles to just pull and stretch and drag and try and get this pattern nice and symmetrical. Which is fairly easy because we've got this, this pattern has sort of a middle point that we can use as a guide along this guide that we've set up. It's not going to be perfect, but you can get it quite close. And actually that looks a little bit better. You see how this center line hits sort of the center point of that pattern. Let's duplicate this layer. Flip it. There we go. Now, that looks pretty darn good. I'm glad I redid it. Sometimes it helps to just restart the whole process as opposed to fumbling along the path you've already started, especially if it's the wrong path. That'll work. So long texture 2. Let's drop that in. That's obviously not lined up right. Let's see what we got. Well, 50% actually seems to get it pretty close. That's better. Is that better? I think that's better. So obviously, there's a little bit of trial and error here in trying to get this right. Let's see what that gives us. Not so bad, actually. Do the same thing with the bump map on this texture. Just doing a little close-up, just checking it out. I think I want to add a little bit more light to the scene too. It's a little dark. I think I'm going to do is just throw on GI to accomplish that. Let's check that out. Yep. Little effect there. It's because we don't have much bouncing and going on. So I'm just going to use this quick grayscale gorilla psych as a background. Simple, effective. So that's going to give us, since we have a background now, we're going to get a little bit more of a realistic bounce with the lighting. Since GI is on as well. I think a neutral, sort of a neutral gray background will work well for this guy. It's a little dark, I think. Thanks, Chris. My favorite third-party plugin for cinema. That's a good question. The one I use the most probably is this Magic Solo. It's super simple, and it's like something I click all the time in my daily workflow. But to be honest, I'm not a huge plugin guy. I used to use the Grayscale Gorilla lighting a ton, but I found that it was a little intense for, um, when you get into long render times, you're doing animation. That Grayscale Gorilla stuff just it's too heavy. So I've really stopped using that. So, and I don't use any rendering engine plugins or really much of any of that stuff at all, to be honest. So let's say Magic Solo. How about you? Are there any third-party plugins that you find really useful, use frequently? Ooh, X particles. I hear that's really cool. I've never played with that, but very powerful stuff as I understand it. So I'm going to add a few more details to the body too. I'm liking where the mask is heading, and I don't want to overdo the mask, but what I think we could benefit from is maybe some crazy hair sticking around outside the edges of the mask. And you see, as soon as I grab this guy in point selection mode, he goes back to his T pose. This is polygon selection mode, but the point stance. So let's see here. I'm just going to go around sort of where the real hair is anyway. Don't need soft selection on. Just going back and forth, making sure I have a symmetrical selection here. Which can be a little bit tricky sometimes, believe it or not. One, two, four, five. So that seems good. So let's add some hair. Whoa, that's a cool haircut. One of the things that's going to happen is this hair is just going to go automatically go right through the mask. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get it the right length, and I'm just going to comb it. Which I love that there's just like a brush. Shoot, maybe I didn't make it long enough. You always want to go in and turn on a few of these channels in the hair material. Typically, it's a really straight, boring, very CG looking material right out of the gate. And adding a bit of clump and frizz and all that stuff really adds a lot of texture and makes it seem more realistic. So. Mm. Yeah, I have that one up here too, the aligning one, center axis 2. I don't use it that much. I should probably use it a bit more. Let's try making that hair even longer. Hmm. I'm gonna hit the play button and let this hair drop. See if that acts a little bit better. So now it's feeling a bit unnatural the way it's sticking out of the edges of that mask. And it's also taking away from that really interesting outline that the mask has. Yeah, that feels a lot more natural. The hair is sort of falling at the shoulders. In fact, I might make the hair even longer again now that it's falling at the shoulders. That's going to stick it all back up. That's okay. I just added just a little bit of alpha to these colors, just because I want that skin to blend through a little bit closer. And I just realized that these outlines in red have an alpha, so I might need to make duplicates of these. Make that work properly. It's weird that that has expanded. All right, let's see how that goes. Changing my mind. Keep it basic. Wow, why'd you do that? No. Did not know that that would reset it. All right, now the last thing I think I'm going to do. I'm not feeling these black trunks that much, right? I think I can do is just go in here and alter that. The best way to do that is with a color selection. So let's do this. Select color range, black. Okay, let's start with that. Let's see what we get. Well, now he's definitely got blue trunks on. I'm not sure that's the color we should go for. We got just a little bit of black left over. So I'm just going to use a stroke to add just a bit of cover up for that black, and that is not working. Huh. Oh, so I had it positioned to inside. We want outside. 2 pixels. I accidentally grabbed some pieces that I didn't need, like in the eye. Save that. Pop back over here. Just hit reload. Didn't seem to do it. PSD. Open. That's better. Definitely took care of that little black outline we were worried about. It's the best way to do this. All right, I'm going to create a little zigzag in Illustrator and add it to these shorts. See how that works. All right, Chris, thanks for stopping by, dude. Good luck with your voiceover stuff, and hope to see you next week. Enjoy. Just going to create a line, object, path, add anchor points. Keep doing that. That's basically the way to subdivide an Illustrator. Path, add anchor points, object, path. I think that's probably enough. So I'm just going to select every other one. Nudge it upwards. Look at that zigzag. Let's make it a little bit thicker. I'm going to use that. I'm going to use this color alteration layer as a means to mask it. So I can just hit Command and click on this icon. That'll select the layer. Then I'll hit this mask mode, and that'll trim these off, as you can see. I'm also going to get after that warp tool again, because the short line sort of does this curving thing. It doesn't sort of do a curving thing. It absolutely does a curving thing. All right. Let's see what we got. That may be too large a zag. It's fairly warped too, unfortunately. All right, let's try that one more time. What I'm going to do is have a curved line from the outset. So nope. Add anchor points. Now I'm just going through and making all these anchor points have a hard interpolation. I'm not sure if there's a way to do that automatically. All right, let's see how this one does. Try that one out for size. Yeah, that lighter zigzag's working a lot better. It's about the right size too, I think. Cool. I'm going to save this out, do a bit of color correcting. We're going to call it a finished illustration. Right. Shadows. Just do with a little bit of a fake HDRI effect. Just a little bit of a crispier image. Bump some of those contrasty values up. What I'm noticing here, this drives me nuts. I'm not sure why this cyc has this line in it, but I don't like that. So what I'm going to do is duplicate that, bring it to the top, add a bunch of blur. It's gone. Shoot, you know, I did that in the wrong order, so we're redoing all this. Yeah. All right, so let's grab that, paste, blur, blur. There we go, filter. I just noticed we have a couple little hairs poking through the mask here. You almost don't even notice them at scale because of the detail. The one I'm just noticing as I get a little bit closer here is this one poking out of the eye, just because it's in such a prominent place. I'm going to retouch it a little bit. So I'm just using the stamp tool, get in there and just take that out quickly. The rest of them I'm going to live with because really at scale you don't even notice them. So that's fine. Yeah. So man, what a fun mask shape. We got a lot of really cool texture and interest in there. This is a fun exploration of how to clip textures from actual source photos themselves and adjust them and get them in the model working nicely. We also played a little bit with altering the textures that Fuse will generate and altering some of the proportions of the model right in Fuse and then using Mixamo to pose it, which gives us a really great base model for the characters mesh. So I'm really pleased with how that came out. The mask, of course, ton of fun, a lot of character and personality, and it's just been another really fun week as always. So thank you very much for stopping by. If you want to keep up with my work, I'm at DLGNCE on essentially every social media platform. Instagram and Twitter are where you're going to find me most active. My URL is diligence.studio, so check out some of my new and most up-to-date projects there. If you like what you saw, please hit like and subscribe, share it with a pal, and we'll see you right here next week at 9 Pacific, 12 Eastern. Stuart saying goodbye. Thanks, guys. Enjoy your practice. We'll see you soon.